This is not a love story. This is the story of a woman who erased herself from existence, piece by piece, for a man who kept forgetting she did it. Her name was Betty Grof, and over the course of Adventure Time, she time-traveled into the apocalypse, stole the powers of a mad wizard, failed every test designed to make her let go, and ultimately fused with a chaos god for Simon Petrikov, a man who just wanted to die in peace. Betty wasn't supposed to be a tragic character. She was just a picture on Simon Petrikov's wall, the fiancé he lost when he put on a cursed crown and became the Ice King. Simon recorded a video diary talking about how he chased Betty away the first time he wore the crown, shooting ice bolts and screaming, "Where is my princess?" while she ran from him in terror. He never saw her again after that. For 1,000 years, Ice King had no idea that Betty even existed, that he'd once been a man named Simon who loved someone so much it destroyed both of them. But then Simon got his sanity back. In Season 5, Episode 48, literally named Betty, a creature called Bella Noche stole all the magic in Ooh during Wizard City's wizard battle, which meant the crown's power keeping Simon immortal was gone. He was finally himself again, lucid and human and free from the curse that had controlled him for centuries. The only problem? He was 1,047 years old and his body was catching up fast. Simon was dying. So what did he do with his last hours of sanity? He built a time portal using Hambo, Marceline's childhood toy, as a magical catalyst to reach back into the past so he could apologize to Betty for what he'd done. Just apologize. That's all he wanted. To tell the woman he'd scared away that he was sorry, and then die as himself instead of as the Ice King. The crew actually split this episode into two halves conceptually. The first half focused on Simon, Marceline, Finn, and Jake building the machine, and the second half was all Betty trying to save him. But Betty didn't let him apologize. The second that portal opened in front of her, showing this older version of Simon reaching through time to say he was sorry, she made a choice. She jumped through. Just leapt into the future without hesitation, without asking questions, without even knowing what year it was or what had happened to him. She landed in Ooh, saw Simon dying in front of her, and immediately decided she would fix this, no matter what it cost. And this is where the tragedy really starts. Because Betty's first instinct wasn't, let me process this apocalyptic future I just arrived in, or maybe we should talk about what happened. It was, I need to save Simon at any cost. She straight up told him she'd find a way to keep him alive and free from the crown's curse, like those two things could somehow coexist. Simon wanted to die with his sanity in her arms. He'd accepted his fate, but Betty? She couldn't accept it, so she made him a promise she had no idea how to keep. She flew to Wizard City alone, defeated Bella Noche in 2 hits, and restored all the magic to Ooh. Which sounds heroic until you realize what that meant. The crown's magic came back too. Simon's immortality returned, but so did the curse. He became the Ice King again, losing his mind, losing his memories, losing Betty for a second time. And Betty watched it happen. She watched the man she'd just sacrificed her entire life for disappear back into madness, and then she left on a flying carpet to start searching for a cure. Alone, in a future she didn't understand, for a man who no longer remembered she existed. In Season 7, Episode 20, King's Ransom, Betty actually stole Gunther and the crown from Ice King to begin experimenting on it. She used Gunther's latent power as Orgolorg, this ancient cosmic entity, as some kind of catalyst for her experiments. At the end of that episode, Ice King sees her and says, "You're beautiful," which is this subtle nod that he might have had some subconscious recognition of her. Then, in Season 8, Episode 2, You Forgot Your Floaties, Betty teams up with Magic Man. She'd been doing research since her first appearance on various magical entities and found a common theme among all of them: magic, madness, and sadness. Those 3 things always went together, and Betty was willing to dive into all 3 if it meant saving Simon. At the end of that episode, Betty takes Magic Man's hat and gains all his powers. Her eyes turn white, just like Magic Man's and Ice King's, showing she's been corrupted by magic. There's this moment where Simon, who's been turned into a tiny crab, silently mouths the words, "You forgot your floaties," to her. It's a metaphor. Floaties are what kids use when they can't swim yet. Simon was trying to tell her she'd just jumped into the deep end of magic without knowing how to swim, that she was already underwater and drowning. But Betty couldn't hear him. She just screamed, and the scream turned into this maniacal evil laugh as she disappeared. In Season 10, Episode 11, Temple of Mars, Betty ended up trapped, going through these trials designed to make her realize she needed to let Simon go. And in one of those trials, she met a past version of herself and had the chance to change history, to make past Betty take that trip to Australia and never meet Simon at all. She almost did it. She changed past Betty's plane ticket from next week to that same day, essentially erasing their relationship to save Simon from the crown. But it was just an illusion, a test to see if she'd learned anything, and she failed. Because Betty didn't learn that she should let Simon go, she learned that she should try even harder. Finn and Germaine tried to tell her to take time for herself, to focus on Betty instead of Simon. And you know what she said? "I've spent so much time on Simon, there may not even be any her left anymore." She admitted it. She knew she'd erased herself trying to save him, and she still couldn't stop. There was nothing left of Betty. Just the mission. Just Simon. The finale, Season 10, Episode 13, Come Along With Me, is where everything comes to a head. GOLB, this ancient chaos deity, attacks Ooh. Betty and King Man, formerly Magic Man, actually summoned GOLB together. Betty thought she could use GOLB to transform Ice King back into Simon, and King Man wanted to wish back his dead wife Margles, who GOLB had taken from him years ago. Turns out summoning an entity of pure chaos was a bad idea. GOLB swallows both Ice King and Finn whole. Inside GOLB's stomach, because of the digestion process, everyone gets reverted to their essential forms. Ice King becomes Simon again. Betty loses her magic powers and becomes sane again, back to who she was before you forgot your floaties. And the ice crown itself gets reverted to its pre-wish state, meaning it can grant its very first wish again. So Betty puts on the crown, the same crown that ruined Simon's life, that started this whole nightmare, and she uses its wish-granting power to try to erase GOLB from existence. There's this terrifying scene where Red starts slowly shrinking around Betty with this drilling sound. It's claustrophobic and haunting. She says, "I wish to banish GOLB from this world, except it doesn't work." Because Betty's truest wish isn't to destroy GOLB. Her truest wish is to protect Simon at all costs. So instead of banishing the Chaos God, she fuses with it. Betty Grof stops being human and becomes GOLBetty, this hybrid entity that's part Betty, part eldritch horror. She opens a portal and leaves through it, taking GOLB's threat with her. And the last thing Simon sees is the crown falling to the ground and his fiancée disappearing as a cosmic entity. Simon cries out for her as Betty GOLB leaves the planet through another portal. She saved him. She finally did it. Simon was human again, sane again, alive again, and it only cost Betty her entire existence. Simon tried to wish her back using Prismo's time room. It failed, just like when King Man tried to wish back Margles. Prismo explained that when someone is taken by GOLB, all that's left of them exists only in memory. The only thing that appeared when Magic Man tried to wish Margles back was a wastebasket, because that's all that remained of her in his mind. So, Simon spent years as a human dealing with the fact that Betty had given up everything for him. Her past, her future, her research, her dreams, her body, her mind, and he'd just let her do it. The Fionna and Cake spinoff is where Simon finally gets it. In episode 8, Jerry, he's shown his past relationship with Betty through the lens of a fictional story, and for the first time, he sees what actually happened. Betty idolized him. She was his student. She'd read all his research. She called him the Simon Petrikov. There was a power imbalance from the start. And when she mentioned she had a trip to Australia planned for her own research, he just said, okay, when she offered to skip it for him. He didn't tell her to prioritize her commitment, didn't offer to reschedule, just immediately accepted her putting him above her own passions. He set that precedent on day one. In episode 10, Cheers, Simon finally admits it. "I stood by and allowed you to sacrifice yourself for me." He sees it now, how every time Betty gave up something for him, he just let it happen. The Australia trip, her career, her life in her own time, her sanity, her identity, her existence. She kept sacrificing, and he kept accepting those sacrifices without question. Not because he was malicious, but because he was weak-willed, and she was so determined to center her entire world around him. And the most heartbreaking part? Betty doesn't regret it. When Simon finally gets to say goodbye to her in Cheers, GOLBetty manifests in his memory as human Betty one last time at a bus stop. She tells him they both could have made better choices, but she doesn't regret any of them. She boards a bus, transforms back into GOLB, and leaves. She got what she wanted in the end. Simon was safe. That was always her truest wish. This is why Betty and Simon's story hits so hard. It's not a fairy tale about true love conquering all. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when love becomes obsession, when sacrifice becomes self-erasure, when one person gives everything and the other person doesn't realize they should have said no. Betty didn't die a hero. She died because she couldn't exist without Simon, because she'd spent so long trying to save him that there wasn't enough her left to save. Adventure Time could have played this as romantic, the devoted partner who gives up everything for love, who becomes a cosmic entity to protect their soulmate, who never regrets a single sacrifice. But the show was smarter than that. It showed us that Betty and Simon's relationship was fundamentally broken from the beginning, that Betty's love was unhealthy, that Simon's passive acceptance enabled her self-destruction, and that sometimes the person you love most is the person you should have walked away from. What did you think of Betty's story? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more videos like this, hit that subscribe button.